Hi everyone, so this is my first lesson from afar. I hope you guys are all having a great weekend. This first lesson is going to be titled Unusual Subjects. And we're going to look at some situations where it might be a little bit difficult to find the subject because the subject might not always look like it is a noun or pronoun. The first type of subject that we're going to look at that's unusual deals with what I call a gerund, and I know I talked a little bit about that in class, but we're going to go over exactly what a gerund is. Words that end in ing can be a little bit tricky, as we talked about, and the reason that they're tricky is because they can be a couple of different parts of speech. They could be a noun, they could be a verb, they can be an adjective. We're probably most used to talking about them as verbs, saying something like they were walking or they were running. But today we're going to talk about ing words that actually can be nouns, and we call those nouns gerunds. The key to a gerund is that it has to end in ing. It's not going to be a gerund if it doesn't end in ing. And as I said, we think about ing words as verbs, but gerunds are not verbs. Gerunds equal nouns. So what we mean by a gerund, the true definition of a gerund is going to be a word that ends in ing Sorry about that. So a noun is going to be a word that ends in ing that could have been a verb in a different situation. We call it a verbal. But is functioning as a noun. So to repeat that, a gerund is a noun. It's a word that ends in ing that could have been a verb in a different situation, but is functioning as a noun. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. Let's take the word playing. We think of playing as an action. We think about it as something that you do. You play with your friends. You play baseball. But depending on the situation, we could be talking about playing as an act. So with gerunds, we want to get across the idea of act versus action. When we're talking about an act, we're talking about a noun. The act of somebody doing something. When we're talking about an action, we're talking about a verb, if the person is actually doing it. So that's a question to keep in mind that might help you figure out a gerund. Is there an action actually happening? If not, it is most likely an act or a noun. So I'll give you an example using the word playing. Let me just erase this. Playing baseball is a great job versus playing baseball, whoops, my bad, versus I am playing baseball. If we look at the first one, because we know that is always a verb, we know that is our verb of some variety. Is not helping another verb out, it's actually a linking verb. Thinking about our subject-verb marriage, what blank is a great job? Playing baseball is a great job. Playing baseball becomes our subject. Baseball is a great job, that doesn't really make sense. Playing is our simple subject. we're talking about the act of playing baseball. No one actually is doing any playing of baseball in this example. When we look at the second example, am playing, am is always going to be some form of verb. Am is helping out playing in this case. I am playing baseball. That's what I'm actually doing. I'm completing an action. The subject of this sentence is I. The verb is am playing. Okay, let's look at another example using the word running. So in the first sentence, I have we were running down the street versus running down the street makes me winded. So in both, I have the same phrase, running down the street. Down the street is a prepositional phrase. What we need to find out is what are the subject and verb marriage in our in these sentences. So looking at the first sentence, there's a word in the sentence that is always going to be some form of a verb. And that word, if you can't guess it, is were. So were is always going to be some kind of a verb. So when we look at a being verb like were, we always want to look at the word after it. Is the word after it acting as a verb? Is it telling something related to an action? We were running. Well, in this sentence, people are actually running. If you were to draw this sentence out, you would draw people in motion. Were running is the entire verb phrase. We is our subject. In the second sentence, running down the street makes me winded, again I have that phrase running down the street. Let's look to see if we can find that verb. Well, makes is our verb. That's what's actually happening in this sentence. Something is making me winded. Well, what's making me winded? Running is making me winded. Running would be our simple subject. Our entire subject would be running down the street. Don't forget about a little tip I told you about the subject and verb marriage. Sometimes it's easier to find the verb first, then look at the word that belongs with the verb that's united with it. That word might not be next to it, but even if it ends in ing, like a gerund would, if that word goes with the verb, it is most likely the subject. Okay, so let's look at a couple more examples. We'll try to find that subject-verb marriage before you go out on your own. So looking at the first sentence, we're trying to find the marriage. What is the subject and the verb? He is walking to the store. So there's a word in here that is always going to be a verb in some variety, either linking or helping, and that word is. So I know that is in some way a verb. I want to look at the word next to it to determine if is a helping verb. He is walking. So is he actually doing something? Is he actually moving his feet and walking? Yes, he is. So walking is also part of that verb. Well, who is walking? What's the word that goes with is walking? He is walking. He is our subject. Let's look at the next one. Traveling across country is my favorite way to spend break. Well, again, I have the word is, so I know that is in some way a verb. It doesn't appear to have another verb after it that it's helping out, so in this case, is a linking verb. Well, what is? Country is my favorite way to spend break? That's not a good relationship. Across country is my favorite way to spend break? That's not the best relationship. Traveling is my favorite way to spend break. Well, that makes sense. So traveling is my subject. You could include traveling across country as part of your subject. That would make it complete. The simple subject would be traveling. Let's look at one more. Playing a long game of dodgeball usually makes me hungry. So this is a tricky one. I want to try to find my verb here. Playing a long game of dodgeball. Well, if the verb was playing, what is playing? Well, no one is at him playing. Would him be the subject for playing? That doesn't sound right. So a long game of dodgeball. There's no verbs in there. Usually is not a verb, it's an adverb. Makes. Well, makes him hungry. So something is making him hungry. So okay, so makes is my verb. It's an action. Well, what is making him hungry? Dodgeball usually makes him hungry. That could potentially work, but it actually goes back to the word playing. Playing dodgeball makes him hungry. Dodgeball itself doesn't make him hungry. It's playing dodgeball. Playing would be our simple subject. Playing a long game of dodgeball would carry on that simple subject. That would be the complete subject. Playing makes him hungry. is our subject-verb relationship. Okay, so just to review a little bit of what we went over, as we've been talking about, the subject and verb create a relationship, a sort of marriage, and sometimes it's easier to find the verb first, remembering that is, and are, and were, and was, and words like that are always going to be some type of a verb, and then finding the noun that goes with that verb, the subject that is actually doing or being the verb. We need to keep in mind that gerunds are ing words that are functioning as nouns. They might look like a verb, but if someone is not actually doing it, if we're talking about the act versus the action, gerund relates to the act, the verb relates to the action. Nouns relate to the act, verbs to the action. So something to keep in mind. Please complete the answers and make sure all your notes are taken on the note sheet provided on Schoology. Also, please check out the Schoology page under the grammar folder with more information about gerunds if you are confused. Hope you have a great day.